Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, thanks for that, Sherry. We also want to thank Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today, and while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor and our guest co-host, Kirsten Trainer, from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. Kim, good to see you again. We sure have a great show lined up with Strong Microbials. This will be a good one covering honeybee probiotics.
Yeah, this is something I don't know anything about, really. I know it has something to do with nutrition and bees eating and being healthy, and I also know that there's a lot of commercial beekeepers that really like this stuff. So we needed to find out about it.
Yeah, the only thing I know about probiotics is it's in my yogurt, and it seems to do me well. So this will be a good show.
It should be.
Hey, speaking about honeybee nutrition and probiotics and everything, our show last week actually Kirsten's interview with Australian beekeeper Simeon Valkenburg really have people going bananas for bees, don't they?
I've heard over the years people doing that, but to make it an actual bee food, this was something else.
I thought he was pulling our legs and just being comical and say, yeah, sure. You just throw the bananas underneath and put the lid down. Or you're just like, all right. I wasn't born yesterday. But
I'm going to have to try it. Now, can you feed bees bananas during the honey flow?
Can you market a banana flavored honey? How quickly would that? Anyways, so on that note, so we tracked down the person who started, who pulled together the research paper for that Simeon's referenced. She is a beekeeper out of Oregon who did that research as part of her University of Montana's Master Beekeeping Program with Dr. Jerry Bromenshank. Those papers are up on our show notes for last week's show with Simeon. And we're going to have Katharina on our show in a couple weeks. So I encourage listeners to come back and listen to Beekeeping Today podcast and learn about the bananas for bees.
It's for real, huh? Okay.
It is for real. It's impressive, the work she did. So I believe it. Hey, Kim, you got a book review for us.
Yeah, I just got a hold of a copy, and I just finished reading the book that Ann Harmon and Andrew Gibb did just before, and it was published just after Ann passed. And it's a book aimed at people taking the master's program in the UK, which is way different than any master's program we have here. So, let me dig into it a little bit, okay?
All right, let's listen to it.
This is a unique book, Jeff, and it was just released. It was released the week that Ann Harmon passed, and she's one of the authors. Andrew Gibb is a master beekeeper in the UK, and he's the other author, and they worked on this together, and they've got another one coming out shortly that we'll talk about at a later time. But it's about, basically, Jeff, do you know how the Master Beekeeper program in the UK works? It's significantly different than any master's program in the US. They have what they call modules. There are 8 of them, and they cover the basics of honeybee management, honeybee products, honeybee forage, honeybee biology and behavior, breeding, and history. There's an individual exam for each of these, and only a select few are given each year. So you just don't walk in, take it, and walk out a master beekeeper. It takes a while. The program is run by the British Beekeepers Association, and for the exams that require hands-on bee management, an examiner, believe it or not, Jeff, an examiner will come to your home, and you can manipulate your own bees. Each exam has a study book so you can prepare for the exam. After passing modules 1, 2, and 3, and one other from 5, 6, and 7, you are awarded the Intermediate Theory Certificate. And after passing all modules, you are awarded the Advanced Theory Certificate. The last exam you take is on the history of beekeeping, which the book that we're talking about here particularly covers in much more detail than the existing study guide they had. They've essentially updated it, improved it, offered a lot more information. The book provides a fascinating insight into how beehives, beekeeping equipment, and beekeeping methods have developed over the centuries. Lengthy observation enabled the discovery of the importance of bee space by Reverend L.L. Langstroth. And after this discovery, the ingenuity of many beekeepers has solved numerous problems associated with colony management. Bee Space to Beehive is the first of 2 books describing the background, like I just mentioned, the background to beekeeping as it is today. It covers the evolution of beehives, the introduction of various types of beekeeping equipment over the years, and the development of a whole slew of beekeeping methods and practices. These include the contributions of Francis Huber, William Carr, Julius Hoffman, Robert Manley, the Porters, Colin Butler, Charles Miller, Gillette Doolittle, Gilbert Doolittle, Pageant, Swarm Control, Snellgrove, and Tarnoff, and a whole lot more. This publication and its companion, Beehive to Beekeeper, that's the second one that's coming out, which is going to be released in September 2020, are going to be invaluable to students of Module 8 of the British Beekeepers Association examination, and I'm going to thank any beekeeper who wants to know a lot more about the history of beekeeping. It's a great book.
All right, thanks a lot, Kim. That was really good. So let's get right into our interview with the folks from Strong Microbials. I want to welcome Slava and Vera to the Beekeeping Today podcast. Welcome.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Kim. Hello, Jeff.
Hi.
Jeff, this is going to be an interesting program because I don't know a whole lot about what these people do. We have Vera and Slava Strogolova. I'm close, but I'm not probably there. But that's who we have. We have Vera and Slava. Okay. They are with a company called Strong Microbials, and they deal with probiotics in animals. And our experience, of course, is just with bees, but they've got a lot more experience with this science than I realized, a lot more than bees. So, Vera and Slava, I want you to tell us how you got your start, and then some of the animals that you've worked with and projects you've been involved in up to bees.
Okay. Well, Vera and I are both scientists. We're both biologists. My focus was more on immunology and molecular biology, and Vera's was more on genetics and microbiology.
Yeah, and I think it was when we just got our degrees, we were working in animal nutrition and in looking and developing different probiotics and testing different probiotics for animals in big animal production operations. So it's livestock like cattle and dairy cows and poultry, swine, as well as environmental questions such as odor and pathogens associated with animal operation. And we were involved in projects that were very interesting that were helping to improve the health and health of animals and profitability of the farming operation using microbes. So using probiotics that help animals digest the food better, help them have a healthier, more resilient immune response, one project that I was working on was with baby calves that were just calved and were put on milk replacement. And at that time, many animals are stressed and they have diarrhea. And so we were testing bacillus probiotics, which help them recover from that diarrhea and have fewer episodes and have less treatment costs. And that was just very interesting. And that's just like one example of us being exposed to probiotic and getting started with formulating and testing different probiotics for animals. So that was a pretty big field, and we decided to I guess you decided to branch out and become independent, and that was where Strong Microbials came from.
Exactly. Yes, our first exposure to agriculture and microbial products is through dairy industry as well as poultry industry.
Yeah, do you know what silage and silage inoculants are?
Silage, yes.
So we made silage inoculants. Originally, it's a natural microbial product to preserve silages such as dry hay or alfalfa or corn silage for
all of that,
animals to eat in the winter, for example.
So all of that feed is pickled by microbial fermentation, and adding the microbes to the feed and adding the microbes to the animal diet helps dairy cows and other animals be more resilient, more healthy, and have better, the feed nutrient conversion.
Yes, better digestion. You're able to unlock more energy from the same amount of food.
So we had fun with that stuff. You can tell.
The way we ventured into beekeeping is we were approached by AAS master beekeepers to develop a product for honeybees.
And that was very different. You can weigh a dairy cow and you can figure out how much milk it produces. And we're like, how do you do it with a bee?
Exactly.
How long ago was that?
That was in we started working on this in end of 2012, beginning of 2013, and we developed the product close to the end of 2014. So it took us some time to do that.
Yeah, it's been more than 5 years now that we actually kept bees, and it's fun. We didn't know that we would be working with bees, but it's fun.
It's quite a difference to go from working with cows to suddenly be working with bees.
So you are beekeepers.
Yes, we are. Absolutely.
Okay.
We're urban beekeepers. We have bees on the roof of our production facility.
Yeah, we're in Milwaukee, and you can have two colonies of bees in Milwaukee, but we actually asked for research apiary permission.
Yeah, we work with
you got it, and we can have 24 or more beehives.
Well,
we fluctuate between 15 to 30, depending on our experimental setups.
very cool.
Once you got introduced to bees and beekeeping, and then I'm guessing Carol and Earl were talking to you about doing what you were doing with chickens and all these other animals for bees. How did you start figuring out what bees need?
So there was actually a lot of study and research and a lot of published literature too about bees and bee microbes. So Dr. Martha Gilliam, for example, was studying the microbiology of honeybee gut and honeybee hive environment in the 70s and the 80s. And a lot of that work kind of sat around for some time until it was revisited again with around the time that the colony collapse disorder and other problems surfaced, right? So there wasn't as much talk about the microbes and the bees until early 2000s. And then I think that we were looking at different microbial species that were already studied and known to be safe for the bees and also environmentally safe, present in the hive environment, and had some benefits. So one of the studies, and I think that there was a pretty good mention of it in the Bee Culture magazine, right? The history of probiotics and everything like that. I think that was an April issue. But basically, I think that Dr. D. Evans from USDA was the one who pioneered a lot of different studies of bacteria and probiotics again in 2004, he looked at feeding different bacteria to the bees and looking at their immune responses. So bees produce 4 different peptides, antimicrobial peptides, which help them fight different pathogens such as AFB. And I think that the study looked at Lactobacillus acidophilus and plantarum and Bifidobacterium bifidum. Those are all different, just very wide range, widely used lactic acid bacteria. And he found that they feeding these bacteria stimulated the immunity and the immune response and production of this antimicrobial peptide in honeybees. And then there were other studies, many of them looked at feeding bacillus to yeast and finding benefits for the honeybees. So we just kind of rambled and found lots of different literature, read it, and figured out that we can probably stand on the shoulders of others to use something that we knew was safe. There was a lot of other literature about other bacteria and microbes for the bees, but not all of them had really great benefits and safety record.
So before we go much further, can you give just a little bit of a background? What are the microbials, or what are the probiotics? I mean, is this the same stuff I'm eating in my active yogurt? And is it? I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that is so that we know exactly?
Right. Is it like yogurt?
It's very similar to yogurt, lactic acid bacteria. Yogurts typically have, just a few species and lower concentration than what's really required for your gut to be properly populated.
Yeah, and for yogurt too, I mean, the concentration and the stability of a probiotic is very important. So sometimes you can take a yogurt, and other times, that there are those capsules, the dried, freeze-dried bacteria. They usually have more concentration, and they are more stable, so they will survive for longer, and they're shelf stable. And so using those freeze-dried concentrated bacteria is a hallmark of a good probiotic. And then, like Slava said, selecting a lot of different strains and selecting the strains that actually have clinical or field benefits. That's basically, so the idea is that I like analogies, and that gets me in trouble sometimes, but it's kind of like a cover crop. If you think about an almond orchard, right, and you can have it barren or you can have a cover crop, it's the same idea for the probiotics. You're kind of covering the gut and the organism with different bacteria which are beneficial and symbiotic, which will help to improve nutrition and other benefits.
Yes, no, you actually said it quite well. It keeps the gut environment with proper pH, actually properly acidic. We chose the microbes that were specifically for the guts. Lactic acid bacteria are anaerobic. We want the ones that would naturally survive within the gut of the honeybee or of the host and thrive there. So yes, that's. Are they similar to the ones in yogurt? Yes, they are. What I see is that there's a lot of lactic acid bacteria that is conserved throughout all the species that live on this planet. And that really ranges from, vertebrates, invertebrates, avian species, insects, fish.
Yeah, because lots of those bacteria also are found in the silage and the grasses. In the nectar, there are bacteria in the nectar and in the pollen that actually help to digest it, but also help to attract the honeybees and make it more. What's that study that?
Volatile organic acids.
Yeah, making it more flavorful.
Yeah, it changes the acidity of the flower nectar, and it attracts certain pollinators, repels certain pollinators. I think there was recently a study in Barcelona that they used they fumigated an elderberry tree and saw that the flowers produced much less volatile organic compounds because there were no microbes on it.
Huh. And one last basic question, because is when they determine what kind of the microbes are in the stomach and crops and the system of a honeybee, do you know? How did they do that? Did they pull out the stomach and then put it on a petri dish to see what developed, or is that just?
Yeah. So
the first step.
that's it. So there are different ways to look at what is inside of a bag of gut. So what's inside of, you can kind of so like the seeds, you can sort of seed it on a petri dish and you can see what grows, and that's the culture method, right? You can see what are the viable and culturable bacteria. Sometimes not all of the bacteria and microbes in the gut are cultured. And so right now what the molecular approach is much more popular. So that's the sequencing, when researchers take the bacteria and extract all of the DNA from the bacteria and from the gut contents, basically taking that bee and extracting all of the DNA. And you know how they talk about how if you extracted all of the DNA, there's a lot of bacterial DNA. Well, they can actually specifically sequence and identify which are the bacterial DNA in the mixture and figure out, fingerprint it and understand which bacterial species are present there. And that's how they know these are the bacterial species in the honeybee gut.
Okay. Well, good. Yeah, thanks. That's the extent of my high school biology, too, so I won't ask any more questions.
Well, it changes a lot, right? It changes a lot every year. There's a lot of really exciting progress in the technology.
So bees are picking up these microorganisms in the environment. Foragers are finding them and bringing and ingesting them, and then they more or less colonize in the forager's gut, and then I'm looking at a larva here who doesn't forage. How does that larva get that food? Those microbes, because they have to digest food too.
That's done through nurse bees. For example, when our mothers give us birth, we are passed on the beneficial microbiome from our mothers.
But not so in bees.
But not so in bees. Whenever the queen bee lays the egg, it's
right.
pretty much sterile. It's the nurse bees. They have to feed the larva, bee bread or broiled jelly. All of those will have beneficial microbes as part of the food.
Well, what happens then when the larva pupates? Because everything goes.
Yes, you are absolutely right. So during that time of metamorphosis, the gut lining gets shed. That is correct. So whenever the adult bee comes out, its gut is relatively sterile. Relatively, it's not 100%, but relatively sterile. But it very quickly repopulates its natural relative microbiome by interaction with the hive material, because the first job of the bee is to clean up the cells for the next round. So
and I think that's the part that's really interesting, because it's not just the gut of the honeybee that is housing so many different microbes and bacteria, but the comb.
Yes, the comb
and of the hive environment. Propolis, of course, is antimicrobial, but pretty much everything else has its own microbiome.
And, as well as interaction with other bees, lots of different prophylaxis, lots of different ways to pass on the beneficial microbes. For example, oral prophylaxis, or one of the important ones, I think it's the most important one, is the fecal oral prophylaxis. Bees do help clean each other up as being a social insect. And since based on very extensive research, we see that majority of the beneficial microbes are present in the hind guts, that the fecal oral prophylaxis is the main way to inoculate the bees with beneficial microbes. It sounds interesting.
It always comes down to poop, doesn't it?
Yeah, yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, it is, yes.
And of course, the bee bread, right? Bee bread, too, has its own microbiome. It has so many different bacteria and fungi.
Yes, that are brought in, and you start the fermentation. I mean, there are so many different products that are used in both us and, of course, bees as well, that are fermented. I mean, my favorite one is chocolate. It's I don't know, well, beer too, I suppose, but chocolate is the main one.
All right, so you've got a bee that's got a healthy biome, and things are going fine, and then suddenly they're not going fine. What sort of either environmental or what causes why do I have to feed your stuff to my bees because they don't have enough of what they need? What happens that makes that happen?
Point. Thank you for asking this question. I mean, bees naturally get their beneficial microbes from the environment when they go foraging. That's the main place. That is the main place. They will bring back nectar, pollen, water, propolis. All of those things will contain beneficial microbes. So they're actually foraging for bacteria as well. Why do they run out? Well, modern agricultural practices and certain practices that we as humans do on our urban lawns or suburban lawns.
Yeah, the big problem with just having the normal biodiversity right now, I think, is pesticides and antibiotics and antimicrobial substances. They're kind of everywhere, starting from the antibiotics, which the beekeepers use, and all the way to pesticides and fungicides, which are sprayed.
And herbicides too. Roundup, for example, is a broad spectrum antibiotic.
Yeah, so all of that's just the chemical inputs, right? That can kill the bacteria and make things more sterile. And nature doesn't like sterile. So just like you see in the soil, if you have unhealthy or unbalanced soil microbiome, you can have more pathogens like E. coli, right? That then contaminates salad and other stuff. So it's just the chemical inputs. And then there are also inputs of the diet. Feeding pollen substitute, for example, doesn't really help to add any good microbes to the diet of the honeybee. And they eat a lot of that stuff, just like sugar syrup too, doesn't necessarily, well, by definition, doesn't really add any good microbes to the diet.
So nutrition can really be thought as, multi-level. It's not just good food, it's the ways to digest it, to generate energy.
Yeah, and bees really need pollen, and we all know that, and we try to make sure that bees get adequate forage and adequate pollen inputs. But even that pollen, right? Do you want to talk about that? That, breaking down and digesting that pollen is something that microbes help with. So even when they have adequate pollen resources, they still need the microbes to
generate energy. I mean, energy is a budget, correct, for everything that we do, all of our metabolic processes, health, reproduction, work, immunity, detoxification. All of those are energy demanding processes, and we use energy as a budget. And where do we generate energy? We get energy from food, from delicious food. But it's not just, eating, a delicious meal. It's digesting it into energy. How does that work? And microbes do this. I'm very thrilled that, the idea of digestion and use of microbes have been developing more and more. The way this works is that whenever, the host eats food, the microbes digest the food into what's called a short-chain fatty acids or just organic acids. And that's the fuel, that's the energy currency that is being used to run all of these other metabolic processes. For example, very recently, just a few months ago, was a paper by Dr. Vincent Ritigliano that showed about...
And Kirk Anderson.
Yeah, and Dr. Kirk Anderson, showing that, there is a huge benefit of using microbes to generate more organic acids in the gut for proper metabolic processes.
Right. So, we kind of went far away from your question. Is that okay?
Sorry about that.
That's fine.
But yeah, you were basically right, asking the question of why do we need the microbes in the first place? They should be there, except when they're not.
Yes. I mean, monoculture crops are being sprayed with all these chemical compounds to make sure that the crop itself gets produced the most yield. But I mean, when you take from one, you kind of shorten the other. So,
okay, two things. The first one is, if my bees are living in a place where they aren't challenged by these chemicals that you mentioned and by some of the stresses that bees run into, from what you're telling me, my assumption is that they should probably be healthy all of the time. But I know that they're not. What's going on that does that? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question then is, if I know my bees are living in a challenged environment, I'm a commercial pollinator and I'm exposed to chemicals and I'm exposed to everything bad that can happen to a bee, monocrops, all of the things that you mentioned, then it sounds like I should be routinely helping my bees with a product like this. So in the first case, unchallenged bees, do I need it? Second place, absolutely I do. And if that's the case all the time, some of the time, do I have it every morning for breakfast? Do I, once a month? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. We're trying to answer it year by year, right? So, in the first place, if you are unchallenged and you are in a pristine place and the bees are great, there should be no chemicals, no antibiotics, and no antimicrobials that will unbalance the microbiome.
What about a pollen? I'm going to interrupt you here for a second. No chemicals, but what about a pollen and or a nectar dearth? If suddenly I don't have these things coming into the colony, I've got old bees, they've got it, and they're feeding the young bees, but I'm running out of old bees. What happens then?
Well, during the nectar dearth, that is a stressful time. During the stress times, what we have noticed through literature review and through our own experience is that we see a reduction of lactic acid of beneficial microbes in the gut. That just happens to all the species that start to get stressed. So yes, there will be a necessity to supplement the beneficial microbes in the gut to keep the gut properly populated with the beneficial microbes.
Yeah, so there are still some benefits to a place where you're in a really pristine, clean environment and you don't have chemical stresses. There are still other stresses, and another one is heat stress, and you might be exposed to pathogens. So the stressful times like drought.
And everyone has a role, unfortunately.
Yeah, so there could be other stressors too, which can unbalance the existing microbiome. But the need is much greater for a probiotic product when you know that the chemicals, pollination contracts, and crowding.
Yes, crowding, the holding yards, the staging yards for the commercial beekeeping before they get placed to pollination contracts. Having so many hives in one place definitely creates a cesspool of disease potentially, because there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of overlap. And some beekeepers are very responsible in keeping their bees healthy and their colony healthy. And I would say most of them are very responsible. I see that very well. But sometimes mistakes happen, or sometimes neglect may happen. You can get short-handed, for example, and forget to do certain treatments.
Right, and you were asking is it something that you take every morning, like your vitamin? And we got a lot of experience, right? We got a lot of experience now after several years of understanding what the benefits of taking it daily is for the commercial beekeepers. And it does seem like that's a regular thing that brings regular cadence that brings the most benefit.
Well, what we see is that it's best that every brood cycle has an adequate dose of beneficial microbes in the gut. The gut is dynamic. Everything in our environment is dynamic. There's nothing really static or standing still all the time. Whenever honeybees eat food travels downstream, and part of the mucosa actually gets sloughed off and travels downstream with the food and gets excreted during the cleansing flight. So some of the microbes will get used up and travel through, essentially. But every brood cycle, every 30 days, essentially, that's really the best way, unless the bees are clustered. If the bees are clustered for the winter, they're overwintering, leave them alone, because, they're jolly, they're eating, they're...
So really we started this out with trying to give it a one shot, and quickly found out that wouldn't work, because everything, that's what Slava was saying, is everything is dynamic. And, just once doesn't cut it in those situations.
I mean, if the summer bee lives, on average, say 42, 43 days, once a year is not enough. But if you do it every brood cycle, the population remains properly inoculated with the beneficial microbes.
Can I give them too much?
No, we have not found that giving them too much will lead to any negative consequences. It will cost a lot. That's the only negative consequence.
So we try to give like a cup.
Yes.
A couple cups of. The goal was to go overboard on the safety. So we didn't really feel confident adding any kind of less researched bacteria, which we weren't sure about the safety. So we can give cupfuls of these bacteria to bees, and there's no negative benefit. They might not. They don't get 10 times stronger or something. And also, you mentioned pollen dart and nectar dart, and it doesn't substitute nutrition. You still have to have nutrition for the long term, but it is helpful to have the microbes to make most resilient bees.
What about during a honey flow? Is this going to get in my honey?
We haven't noticed it getting in the honey flow. We tested.
We actually tested the honey.
Yeah,
it doesn't affect the honey in any bad way either.
Yes, that's exactly it.
All right. So I think I got this. I'm looking at the stresses my bees are going through over the course of the season, and if I'm running into a dearth, or I'm moving bees for pollination, or I've run into a pesticide problem, my bees are being stressed. I can tell by looking at them, by listening to them. There's stress. So I'm going to add some of your product to my bees, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, maybe only once a year, but at appropriate times, not just prophylactically once every other month, but I'm kind of measuring the stress my bees are going through. How do I do that? It doesn't get in my honey, you're telling me. I can do it anytime I want. And how do you add this product to a hive?
Well, I wanted to say, first of all, that our product comes as a dry powder, and we ask you to please use it as a dry powder. The main reason for it is because our microbes are lyophilized. They're freeze-dried. The main reason for it is because they're anaerobic. Okay, anaerobic bacteria do not like oxygen, so we need to put them in a state when they are metabolizing very slowly. They're essentially sleeping. They get activated with moisture. So when you feed the product dry, the moisture that is used to activate or wake them up is moisture in the gut, the moisture of the mucosa in the gut. So the beneficial microbes wake up exactly where they should, in the anaerobic environment that is perfect for their health.
Yeah, so you basically give them a spoonful of the dried bacteria.
Yeah, and you can put it right on top of the top bars of your brood chamber.
Yeah, and get it where the nurse bees can eat it easily, quickly.
How long does it take for the microbes to wake up in the gut?
It's immediately. It's the moment moisture is added. But it's definitely quick. It's minutes. It does not take hours.
Okay.
So does this stuff, does your product, I don't mean to call it this stuff, does your product have effects on any, I don't know, what's the word I want? Does it help control, or does it prevent the growth of things, other things that bees run into in their world, diseases, pests, whatever?
Yeah, so there's so just like that, the article in Beeculture was saying, there's a lot of research that is being done right now and still needs to be done in the near future. And we've been running a lot of different field trials and collaborating with others to try to understand which pathogens which diseases we are improving the bees' health in. So, one of the study is still running is in Saskatchewan with Nosema, And there is another one that's running right now too with Nosema and a few smaller field trials. So we can say that there's a lot of academic publications that looked at caged bee studies, like in the lab, in the petri dish, that do have very promising results with inhibiting Nosema or helping honeybees to survive and fare better if they're infected with Nosema. We also know that pathogens that cause chalkbrood, American foulbrood and European foulbrood, again in different petri dish studies and lab studies, the species of bacteria that we selected for the probiotic are promising candidates that inhibit those pathogens, and we think that will translate, and we see in different field studies that it does help to recover or to prevent some of those infections.
Well, that would be pretty wild if that was in fact proven out. Even mitigate some of those infections or the problems that we're hearing a lot.
That there's a lot of different infections, and of course the pest like the varroamite is still like the biggest problem. So not every beekeeper is concerned with chalkbrood all the time, but it does. It does help with. It does help to overcome some of the challenges, and having at least something that's natural and safe is hopefully something that we can contribute.
Yes, well said.
Most beekeepers, the commercial beekeepers, the big guys, their biggest cost is labor. So if I'm going to go to send 20 people out to 50 bee yards today, can I do something for AFB, Nosema, and microbials all at the same time?
You should not use our products together with antibiotics because antibiotics are anti-life and probiotics are pro-life. Antibiotics are just big nuclear bombs that will destroy the microbes. If you are using antibiotics, you can follow up with our products 2 weeks later, just to make sure that the antibiotic is properly been metabolized. Mm-hmm. So what an antibiotic does, it will cleanse the gut, and then you can come in and reseed it with beneficial microbes. What we also noticed is that our microbes can work as a competitive in a mode of competitive exclusion. They can help muscle out pathogens or create a very unfavorable environment for them, so they don't stick around inside the gut or the hive.
So what we came up with in animal industry is the use of probiotics for animals, like chicken, allowed producers to not give the antibiotics to as many animals, and that allowed increasing organic and antibiotic-free production. And our hope and practice right now is that. My hope is that there's maybe less and less need and reliance on using antibiotics, and controlling some of these diseases just with the probiotics would be ideal. And do we actually have any promising kind of trend to say that some commercial beekeepers can stop using antibiotics?
We do have a promising trend. So once again, I don't want to make any drug claims, but yes, we do see beekeepers that have used our products continuously based on the cadence that we recommend, have not seen AFB in their colonies, and they have not used, say, terramycin or tylosin.
And so hopefully does it allow them to save on labor by not using the antibiotics?
That, and it saves also money on antibiotics and creates a very clean hive.
Yes. And another thing that we're trying to think to help save on labor is not opening the hive even to give them the spoonful of probiotics.
Yeah,
do you want to talk about that?
Well, if you're in the field and you don't need to inspect the hive, for example, you can just do a visual inspection from the outside, and we have it's called delivery mechanism. It's called a very fancy name. It's called microcloud. We're creating a cloud of microbes. Essentially, it's a it's a mechanism that uses compressed air to deliver beneficial microbes through the front entrance. Essentially, you blow it right in.
Yeah, trying to not have to spend so much time and still deliver that spoonful of probiotics to the hive.
However, if the beekeeper does need to, say, open up the hive to inspect the hive or to feed it or whatever, do any other treatments, then they should use, they can use the product right on top of the brood chamber. We're very compatible with essentially everything on the market except antibiotics. Even though the Varroa treatments are fine to be used together.
The Varroa treatments too are okay? I can put a Varroa treatment on, oxalic, formic at the same time?
Yeah,
you don't want to mix the two together, but you can put them in at the same time. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes my labor problem much better because I've got somebody not making 4 trips to a bee yard, only 1.
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. All right. So we know what it is and what it does, about how often you're going to need it and when you're going to need it. And what am I missing here? I'm going to go out and buy a bag tomorrow. But what else am I missing?
Well, I want to make sure that your bees are fed, that they have food, because, microbes, they're a digestive aid. Yes, they are used as food. They are used essentially as microbial meat. There was a publication, I think, 2 years ago, by Dr. Steffens that showed that bees are omnivores and they also use microbes as food as well.
Yeah, so I think that's important right here to feed your bees. And I think that using even any kind of protein supplement like pollen substitute is good because you just need to be able to digest those proteins, right? And having the microbes in there will help to get the most out of that nutrition, whatever nutrition they're getting. And I think that one thing that's missing is, at least for me, because I'm just a geek, is trying to understand how it can help with pesticides. Because I think that that's another problem that hopefully we can solve. Because in a natural environment, pesticides are being degraded by microbes in the environment. There is a very interesting article that talks about how pesticides, how lactic acid bacteria, different species of lactic acid bacteria can also help to neutralize or degrade the pesticides, such as neonics and others. And that would be really great to continue more of that research. And there's a lot of, there are several groups that are interested in this right now. And I think that could be an answer to a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's
Also,
pretty amazing.
Sure. I wanted to just say, like, a lot of pesticides or herbicides and fungicides, one of their mode of action is to turn off the detoxification system of the host that they're trying to target. And bees are, insects as well, so they have the same detox system. So what's missing, I believe, I would like to do more research and understanding how exactly our microbes are keeping for example, this P450 detoxification pathway functioning.
How accepted is the probiotic?
Very well, absolutely.
All right.
We use sugar, a powdered sugar, as a carrier to make it palatable, and the microbes themselves, they have a very attractive, palatable taste and smell to them.
Yeah, I'm really impatient. I want everybody to kind of try it and send us as many kind of opinions and videos of it as possible. And we've been getting a lot of mail like that. I think that it really helps to kind of see how quickly it's accepted. And I can send you a video.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have an Instagram account so people can post to the Instagram, or we can go out to the Instagram to see the videos?
Can we give it to you? Yeah.
Yeah, and give it to us now, and then I'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Yes, strong microbials, yes.
And strong microbials, yeah.
But that brings up another quick question. DFM, what does that stand for? Can I ask?
Of course, it stands for direct fed microbials. It's microbes that are being fed to the animals.
Okay.
They're just, yeah. I
Okay.
think that's
All right.
describes it best.
Well, not having a lot of background, I wasn't sure, so I thought I'd clear that up. And I'm going to guess that people listening are going to go, okay, now I know. So thank you. Jeff, have you used any of these?
No, I haven't yet. I plan to.
Okay.
It sounds really interesting.
It does. And I have talked to a good number of commercial beekeepers who are using this product. I've never heard anything bad. It seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. So that's why I wanted to talk to these people today to find out why it's doing what it's supposed to do and how I do it.
Well, and we'll continue to try to get more answers, because I think that's a big adventure ahead of us.
I think for me, I think it makes kind of a sense, and it goes back to we had Jonathan Lundgren on first season talking about soil health and how the soil has, and you touched on it, I think, Vera, before, and the soil is been basically bleached of all the healthy nutrients in the soil and have led to all the problems. And I think that could be extrapolated, as you alluded to the bees and to even ourselves. And I think the proper biotics makes sense to me in terms of restoring to a natural balance.
Yeah,
that's what intrigues me about
getting the most out of any natural system means including all of its components, and we're trying to take one component in isolation. It doesn't work like that, and soil is just such a great example for, it's not just one thing, right? It's not sterile, and you can't really have soil without the microbes.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with all of our gut and bees' guts, cows' guts, chickens' guts.
Yeah. Honestly, we are really hoping to put a bunch of the microbes into the soil too, and trying to do as much for the soil as well.
Now that would be good.
Yeah, we are working with different soil fungi, different endomycorrhiza, different soil bacteria, just to really understand how soils can be restored. Because, understanding from Dr. Jonathan Lundgren what is happening to the soil is very disturbing.
Yeah, and putting back the nitrogen-fixing bacteria into the soil is something that is similar to the probiotic concept, and something that I think will really help many farmers get more out of their systems with less chemicals, fertilizers, and other stuff that is just kind of dead to begin with. Doesn't stay.
One last question is how do you, where do you get this? I mean, how do you grow it? Do you mine it? How's it produced?
Yeah, we grow a lot of microbes, and I never, in my wildest dreams, 20 years ago, if you asked me that I'm gonna grow microbes, but it's fun. It's kind of like a brewing process. When you brew or ferment something, you get a lot of microbes out of it, and that's what we're doing. We're kind of expanding to grow more and more different bacteria, and basically equipment similar to brewing tanks. Yeah. So we're brewing a lot.
Yeah, same thing as breweries making beer. Same idea.
We don't really make beer. I want to make sure that.
Yeah, we don't make beer. We brew microbes. Yeah, we grow bacteria. So for beer, the end product is the yeast has to be dead. We don't do yeast. We do microbes, and it has to be alive at the end.
Yeah, and then we dry it up. We extract it and dry all the bacteria in the freeze or vacuum dryer. And what I wanted to say is that we actually made tons and tons of bacteria, didn't we?
We did, yes, tons and tons of bacteria.
Been doing it for now many, many years, and we're on. Just last month, we had 1,000 batches of bacteria, and each batch is half a ton. So it's about 500 tons of bacteria that we have just dumped out there.
It's fun. Yeah, it's the process is. It's not complicated. It is time consuming and fun. It really is.
How long does it take to grow to maturity in each tank?
Yeah, bacteria actually grow really quickly. So I think the smaller the livestock is, the faster it grows, and bacteria can double every 20 to 30 minutes.
Some can double every 5. So it depends on the species.
Yeah. So, I mean, it usually takes like 24 to 48 hours, depending on the species.
That's fast turnover. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. It takes us longer to collect and harvest and process and test it and all that. It takes us about a week per batch.
Yeah.
And each one has its own tank?
Yeah, they are all separate.
Okay.
They're their own thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to start with a sterile environment before we're growing it in batches.
Well, I got a lot out of this today, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's been good. It's been good having them. And like I said, I'm going to go out and get some of this stuff tomorrow.
Is there any last question? Anything you wanted to tell us that we haven't asked you?
We're trying to share the information on our website and also on a blog that I will also like to share with you guys. It's besciencenews.com.
Okay.
So
we will get that in the show notes as well.
thank you.
I'd be happy to share that.
Ask us questions and throw different challenges our way too.
Very good.
Yes. It's important to really remember that the biggest silver bullet is the beekeeper. The beekeeper themselves. We can help.
We're just a tool.
Yeah, we can help in certain aspects, but we are not the solution for everything. It's a big system to work with. Beekeeping is 1,000 inputs and 1,000 outputs.
Well, it's really been a joy having you on the show today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Super DFM is an interesting product because it's ironic that it's the same thing as the super, as the honey super. So it's
We have to add more supers.
add more supers.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here today. It's been fun. It's been educational, and I look to getting you back in a while to see how you have added, fixed, made better.
Thank you. And if you're ever in Wisconsin or in Milwaukee, please visit our facilities. We'll gladly give you a tour. We'll show you how we do this.
I've got family in Milwaukee, and I'm from Wisconsin, so
Excellent.
I'll be there someday. if I ever get out of town.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again.
All right. Y'all take care. Bye-bye. Probiotics. You know a little bit more now?
Well, I do, and it's amazing the things that they mentioned: monoculture crops, holding yards for pollination, nectar and pollen dearth, herbicides, pesticides, drought, pathogen.
Yeah,
all of those things can be helped or remedied by using this product. I'm major impressed.
Yeah, it just kind of, for me, it opens up my eyes too. We get so singularly focused on the honeybee and what it's doing for us, the varroa mite, but we realize it's each individual bee and the colony as a superorganism, as Dr. Seeley would say, have a lot of stressors, have a lot of things impacting them on a regular basis, and that even just something as simple as or maybe not as simple, but something as a probiotic and helping them with nutritionally makes a big difference in their overall life.
Well, I think you kind of summed it up. A good analogy is the yogurt that you eat, which basically does the same thing, keeps things balanced in there that we need to be able to digest food.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. So, yeah, this was good.
I enjoyed it. I think I'm going to give that a try this fall. Not a paid endorsement, just saying that's... All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars in Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let us know what you like. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued sponsorship of Beekeeping Today podcast. We also want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
I think that about wraps it up for today, Jeff. Thanks.
I'm going to go out and check to see what kind of bananas are left at the grocery store and feed my bees this weekend.
Okay.
Yes, take care.